Hello there.
Hello there.
Welcome to Cinnamon Roll Adventures. If you're new here, I'd highly suggest you start from the beginning because this will make a whole lot more sense. But if you've been following along this entire time, welcome back to... Springtime of 2024 was upon me, which meant that I could start working on some rust proofing. Remember last week when I put in a fan to fix the condensation problem? Well, it died. Probably from the rust dust getting to the motor. I'll fix that later, but first I'm going to continue with patching these holes in the floors. I found a better way to do this where, instead of measuring the hole, I could use a section that I cut out as a template for the new piece. This was a much more accurate way of doing this. By the way, did you know that all the music you hear in these videos was made by me? I've been a drummer for almost 2 decades and a singer for even longer. I grew up in a musical family and have always loved the process of making music. If you're interested, I make most of my music on Machine Micro 2 and Reaper. There's a few other programs I use as well, but I get the feeling that most of you probably aren't that interested. What might interest you, however, is perhaps a place where you can hear all the background music I use without interruption. Is that something you'd be interested in? If so, let me know in the comments section. Yep, that was fast becoming an issue. This kept happening over and over again to the point where I was getting pretty ticked off. I don't know why I didn't just get more magnets to make this easier. I blame my cheap stubbornness. I was running into some issues with the welder not getting a good enough ground, so I cleaned the coating off of some of the hat channel with the grinder. so I decided to take a break from working on the floors. The weather was decent enough to work outside, so I started on removing what I call the safety arm from the front bumper. Once I got the front cover off, I was able to see how this whole mechanism worked, and it was pretty interesting. It turns out that the safety arm and the stop sign were both actuated by airbags, which were filled from the pump that also runs the air brakes. After I'd taken everything off the front bumper, I turned my attention to the stop sign. After all, a school bus isn't a school bus without a stop sign, which is kind of the point. Maybe there was an easier way to do this, but the way these air hoses were routed made it extremely difficult to remove them. The only way I could think to get them off without completely twisting them into oblivion was to rotate the entire stop sign assembly around the hose. While I was outside, I took a look into the side box and it was a mess. There was oil and water everywhere and it was becoming a bit of a hazard. The other door's locking mechanism didn't work at all. The key wouldn't even go in, let alone turn. Luckily, I was able to look in behind to see how badly rusted it was and opted to simply use a grinder to cut the entire latch assembly off. I tried to use the drill here to remove the screws holding the vinyl down, but they were so badly rusted that I ended up giving up and resorting to the grinder once again. Next, I cut the vinyl along the walls with my handy dandy utility knife that also doubles as a wire stripper cutter. You'll see a lot more of this tool throughout the build process. Once the vinyl was out on one side, I went over to the other side of the bus and thankfully that one was in much better condition. It had a little bit of rust, but not too bad. For some reason, the original mud flap was stored in here too. I did more or less the same process here, cutting the vinyl and pulling it out, though I didn't cut the metal strip out on this side. That done, I turned my attention back to patching the holes in the floor. On this particular patch, there was a support welded to the underside of the floor, so I had to cut that off. Naturally, I had to reattach it once the patch was in place, but I'll show you that in a moment. When I removed the support earlier, I bent the tab pretty good, so I had to flatten it out first. I grabbed a bolt and threaded it in through the bottom of the tab. Next, I threaded the bolt through the hole in the patch and tightened it all up with a nut. This held it in place temporarily while I tacked everything in place. Once that was done, I took the nut back off of the bolt, pulled it up with the vice grips, and welded the bolt to the patch. I then finished up welding the two patches to the floor. After that was done, I came back with the grinder and cut the excess off the bolt, welding it flush to the floor. It turned out fairly strong, and I don't think I'll ever have to worry about it coming loose. That complete, I turned my attention to the last patch I would need to do. Now, you might be wondering why I'm not fixing all the holes in the floor. The reason for this is that I don't need to. This floor will have 4 inches of hard foam insulation glued to it, and if water ever manages to find its way underneath, I want it to be able to escape. The reason I fixed the areas around the wheel wells is because water gets flung up by the tires during driving, and I didn't want that getting forced underneath the new floors. Basically, you want water to be able to escape, or it will pool and cause everything to rust. This is the part of the video that I was really excited about. It was finally warm enough to get the floors rust-proofed. I started by vacuuming out the areas where the seat rails used to be, along with all the other hard-to-reach nooks and crannies. I then started on wire wheeling the entire floor. I already took the vast majority of rust off using the grinder, but to get the last little bits off, I had to switch to something finer. I managed to get the wire wheeling done in one day, though it did take 6 hours to accomplish. Needless to say, I was filthy by the time I was done, and my back was killing me. It was satisfying, however, seeing the last vestiges of rust coming off the floors, and I was very pleased by the results. I then went through and vacuumed the entire floor to get ready for chemical prep. This is PUR 15 Metal Prep Rust Remover. I found this at my local Canadian Tire and I would recommend this to be used. I'm not sponsored by PUR 15 or by Canadian Tire, but this stuff works pretty well if used correctly. At first I used this chunk of pool noodle to apply the chemical, but I ended up switching to a broom because, weirdly enough, it actually worked better. The biggest mistake I made here was not putting the chemical on thickly enough. While I was waiting for the chemical to do its thing, I noticed that it was making this really cool marbling effect as it was pulling the rust from the pores in the metal. The entire floor was like this, and it was really fascinating to watch. I waited about 20 minutes before washing the chemical off the floor, which turned out to be a mistake. I should have waited for much longer to let the rust remover work, and this will end up biting me in the bum in the future. I rinsed with the hose and scrubbed with the broom multiple times to get all the chemical off. Originally I had planned to paint the floor the same day I did the chemical treatment, but it ended up being too cold, it took too long for the floor to dry up, and I ran out of daylight. So I decided to come back the next morning. But when I came back to the bus, I found that my condensation issues had returned. The water from the ceiling was dripping onto the floor, and the coating I used on this floor was oil-based. If you know anything about oil-based stuff, it doesn't mix well with water, so I had to dry this up as best I could. Luckily, I was able to wipe up the moisture with a rag, and the floor dried up pretty quickly after that. The coating I used was Tremclad Rust Paint and Primer. This was my second major mistake. Because I didn't get every last shred of rust off the floors, it later started working its way through the paint, and I ended up having to redo this months later with a different product. But you'll see that in a later video. It might have been due to the temperature, but this paint was much stickier and thicker than I was expecting it to be, but it rolled out fine. It was really satisfying watching the floor go from brown and grey to black, though watching this back now I'm pretty sure I didn't put it on thick enough, which added to the issues that I mentioned earlier. But at the time this looked great, and it certainly made a big difference on how the interior looked. This is how I close my paint cans when I don't have a mallet. Don't judge me, it works, okay? And this was the final result. I did end up coming back off camera, and I used a brush to get all the little nooks and crannies that I couldn't get with the roller. And that's it for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to like and subscribe. It's by no means necessary, but I am trying to grow my channel so that I can go on the road and bring you more adventure content in the future. If this wasn't to your liking, maybe gaming content is more your speed. Weirdly enough, I actually have a second channel that features just that. So if that's more up your alley, feel free to give it a gander. It's called Cinebeam, and I'll leave a link in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, enjoy your day, and I'll see you next time.